Finally, Mark.
A lot of times cinematographers are always talking about image and image and image, and I think Faden was the right choice for this movie because all of our conversations are about character. It always comes back to Dave. What is he trying to do? What does he want? How does that frame, does that composition achieve that? Or location scouting, and I take pictures, and he shows up, and I took this picture 2 weeks earlier, and it was snowing, and we need to achieve this look because that's the right kind of emotional context for the scene. I think that's really where Faden and I kind of work the best, is when we can not let, stylistic choices be imposed on the writing. Every time we talk about look or style, we really talk about the absence of style, the absence of imposed style. We really didn't talk about the look of the movie. Faden and I would always talk about the characters, and the kind of style of the film would always evolve out of the narrative.
With Gore, it's really the creative process happens more in the pre-production period, where me and him go to these locations and we start photographing and we find angles that we like. We're like, two little kids with our cameras that, it's just looking for images that we feel could fit the picture, and we would go out with our digital cameras and photograph these locations. And, we were able to find a lot of locations that fit in that palette. And we sort of discovered what the look of the picture should be by doing that. But Chicago in general, the tonality of the whole city, because of all the steel and the stone, and because of the quality of light, sort of gives you the palette we're looking for anyway.
There's really no other city to shoot it in. I think it's a great place to film. I've always enjoyed Chicago. I enjoy the light there. I just think it's a really cinematic, architecturally, and the weather. I just think it's a beautiful place to film a movie.
By the time we started, we really had defined the feel and the texture and the sort of a palette of the film. We sort of were using a much more sort of mid-range scale with very sort of pastel-y tones and less contrasty, which is a very difficult look to achieve.
Tom Duffield and I have experience. We worked together on The Ring, and I think he just has a great sense of how to maintain a color palette, how not to break that color palette, especially in a contemporary movie where you're really designing, 90% of your design is location scouting. It's painting, it's getting rid of that blue car and putting in a gray one.
His life of this weatherman was kind of this monotone life, and so he kind of went with this kind of even palette where there were just slight differences in color. Like in his bathroom, there were all these different levels of gray, or rather it was kind of more of a grayish, kind of a gray beige. So we kind of used that as the cue through the whole movie. It was kind of a generic kind of color palette.
There's a very strict philosophy in terms of creating a look for the movie that is supported by and born out of the character. I mean, Dave's world is kind of clinical and colder and desaturated. Whenever he's at his house, it's a little sunnier and a little warmer, and he looks in the door and really only enters that house, in the third act. It used to be where he lived, so it kind of represents the only warm light in the movie.
Gore had some specific requests for the house. It had to have basically an interesting look. It had to be upscale looking because this weatherman probably made a fairly decent living. And I kind of came to the conclusion right away that I didn't want a house with a house right across the street, because then you're just always looking into somebody's house. We had so much work on the front porch of the house. I was looking for a house at the end of a T intersection, so you could have people on the front porch and get all the depth of the street and the people and the other houses in the background. And when it snowed, all the trees got snow in the trees, and it looked really cool, the snow going off to the horizon. So basically, I locked in this one house. It was kind of a French provincial house, had a nice color of brick. It wasn't too red, it wasn't too beige. It had a nice appeal from the street and had a great curved walkway and a nice big porch with a window off the living room, and you could do shooting to and from the house, and a great place to work, a lot of room on the front porch. I thought it was the ideal house. He wanted the inside of the house to be a warm house because this man has lost his house. He worked his whole life, he had this house, and now he's outside looking in. He's kind of living in this monochrome world, and he looks inside and there's warmth. He sees his family, he sees the warmth of the house, and he can't have it anymore. He can never get past that front door. I wanted the colors to be dark on the walls, warm, I use like these dark gray greens. That's one of my favorite colors. I use it a lot. I used really dark ochres, warm whites, really everything was warm. Even in the front entry hall where we had a lot of work taking place, I used this kind of a blue and taupe wallpaper that if you look really closely, you'll see one of my subliminal weather things. If you look closely at the wallpaper, they look like little satellite photos of like hurricanes. There's just these little swirls in the wallpaper. It's really subtle, but when I was picking through the wallpaper, I go, oh, this looks like a colorized view from a satellite of a hurricane. So we use that. You'll see it if you look really close in the blue taupe wallpaper. For him, we wanted to give him an apartment that was equal to his stature as a weatherman. Plus, I wanted to give him something that had a view. It's Chicago. I want to sell Chicago. I want to show Chicago to everybody. So again, we searched around for apartments and views, and then we hit this one called the River Bend Apartments. And I took the elevator ride up, and I walked in there, and I just went, wow. Because you could see the Chicago River, and you could see all the bridges crossing the Chicago River. The reflections were great on the glass. It had a modern, harder, colder edge, the aluminum. It also reflected his financial success. It was a high visible, great view apartment in Chicago. But he never, I don't think was ever going to see this as his home. He always, I think in his mind, at least until he had the epiphany, he always thought he was getting back into his own house.
What's up, dude?
What's up?
So there's a lot of little sets like the DMV, which is one of my favorite sets, because it really epitomizes our color palette. You know, the kind of that neutral grayish, kind of subtle colors everywhere. It had a real nice graphic feel to it.
We had really, you know, compositions we really liked and frames that we had found in pre-production just with our digital cameras. One of our favorite shots is it just had this, you know, lonely clock on it with this cable hanging down, and, you know, the frame that ended up in the movie is identical to, you know, one of our favorite stills that we took, you know, 2 months prior to that.
You see a lot of clocks in the wall, kind of like a metaphor for life. You know, that's what I said anyways through the whole movie, is these clocks, and we use those as graphic elements. That was the two subliminal motifs I used in the movie, was the target theme and the weather theme. You'll see a little like target in the back of the float, because he's kind of on target. Everything in his life, he's trying to find the target.
It's a wonderful metaphor for his attempt to focus and to get it right, to get the job, to hit the bullseye.
We looked at a couple of archery ranges, but we wanted something that was kind of cool, also reflecting the same palette and this gray lifestyle, the monochrome thing. And we went by this one place on the lakeshore in North Chicago called Belmont Harbor. And out there was this little kind of a point. And not only do you get this nice view of the water and the ice and the sky, with the reverse is you see the skyline of Chicago and the Drake Hotel. It was like a perfect background. That was an archery range that was way west of the city. We just happened to see when we went there scouting, he had all these like little foam animals out there, and they were like, arms were missing and legs were missing, and it was like so kind of Deliverance, kind of strange, that it was really great. We looked at, oh, this is great. There's something really cool about this. And don't touch them, they're great. And so basically we left them alone. We did a little work there and moved a few things around, and I made paper targets to put on some of the paper, the big hay bales that were there. It was a strange location, and it's kind of strange for the movie because it's so kind of this even-keeled movie, I mean, visually, and all these weird animals there. And
really, it's a very surreal scene in a way, because you have all these foam deers and bears and rabbits, I don't know what it was, but it's actually a scene where, you know, it's sort of a cleansing period, of a realization period for Dave's character, and we cut to this sequence where these animals are being rained upon, and the snow is sort of melting and dripping off their faces.
I love working with Gore. We a lot of times, which really helps me, we're on the same page, you know, we think sort of the same about sets, and it makes your life so much easier to go to him and he goes, yes, instead of somebody you go to somebody and go, no, that's not what I had in mind, you know. And you're always trying to figure out what he really wants, because that's sort of my job, is to get what I like and make it into his vision, and if you're both on the same page, it really is great.
Yeah, very nice.